Hello and welcome to DIW, or you can say DIW for short. And today we're going to be covering the newest hot topic discussion. I know I'm a little bit late to it. Obsession. This is going to be a recap of the major events in the movie, and it's going to be a general review of the movie, not a direct play by play. I'm going to include in the end of the video some of my thoughts on some of the characters of the movie, and I'm going to include a bit of my own thoughts while recapping the movie as well. Without further ado, let's get started. So the movie kind of starts off with the four main characters. Ian, the person giving Bear advice on trying to get the girl that he likes, Nikki, and Sarah. No. Bear, Ian, Sarah, and Nikki. All four of those characters are the main characters of this movie so far. And Ian gives the advice to Bear of calling Nikki Freaky Nikki in the beginning because he's too scared to actually have a real conversation with Nikki. So Ian gives him that piece of advice. Bear takes that up, doesn't really confess to Nikki, and doesn't really take in Nikki's consideration of actually interacting with Nikki. It starts off, I'm pretty sure, at a bar, and then Bear's working up the courage, and then Ian interrupts him when they're about to have a moment together, and then Sarah interrupts Bear as well because both of them have their own alternative motivations. You'll see in the later half in the movie, and then Nikki loses her necklace, so that causes Bear to go to this spiritual shop where he gets the One Wish Willow instead of the necklace that Nikki would have wanted. This leads into Nick Bear taking Nikki back home, and him teetering on the line of confessing to Nikki or not confessing to Nikki, and eventually the vibe becomes so weird. Nikki asks him upright, "Hey, do you like me?" And Bear couldn't do anything, and out of pure frustration he breaks the One Wish Willow and is like, "I wish Nikki would love me more than anything else in the world." And this moment really stood out at me in the moment where the Wish Nikki comes to life, and the way that, because Bear Cat dies in the beginning of the movie. Sorry, I didn't mention that, but Nikki didn't. Nikki knew that Bear Cats die, but Wish Nikki interpreted the cat dying as their cat dying, like Nikki's cat dying. So Wish Nikki was like, "Oh, I'm so sad that my cat died," and Bear was like, "What? Your cat died?" And Nikki and Wish Nikki was like, "No, sorry, that was your cat." And it was so cool seeing the way that Wish Nikki is trying to piece together elements of humanity to make her seem a lot more convincing. And this is where the shadow work, the shadows of the movie, does really well to incorporate the horror elements of the movie in the first place. The way that Wish Nikki was trying to put everything together shows kind of what the director themselves said, Corey Barker said, that it's not a possession story, it's the wish reflecting back on the desire that that Bear himself has for Nikki. So it's Bear's desire being reflected back at him. I think that's why he Wish Nikki thinks it's his cat that died, because it's his cat that Bear desires, not Nikki herself. Then they go to dinner, and some things don't line up properly. Wish Nikki tells about how she was high that day, and her dad went to the hospital or died, and she was feeling off because of it. And then they've noticed that irregularity with his friend Ian, and then Bear confronts Wish Nikki about the dad part, and then Wish Nikki was like, "No, no, I thought we were having a nice date," which was like this first moment where things should have gone like, "Whoa, this is really wrong." And then he brings her back home, and then that disturbing scene comes up, and he denies like everything that happened between them. I mean, he denies complete responsibility of like what's happening. Then they have this little like fake honeymoon montage where the real Nikki writes like, "Oh, this is not me." They start to notice things wrong at work and like outside in public. And then one day Bear goes to work. Nikki prepares Bear a sandwich, and it's the cat sandwich, which was like crazy because he didn't even notice the smell of the corpse. And this happens in front of Sarah, by the way. Oh, and add a note too, at the end of the montage, Bear pulls Wish Nikki away from him, showing that like even if he got the wish that Nikki that he wanted, he would have gotten bored of Nikki eventually, because he's like, he doesn't have that much ambition. He doesn't have like much of a dream or goals to go around. And notice the added detail of Nikki wearing the server outfit, being the one like that acknowledge the server being one of the only people that actually acknowledges Nikki's and Bear's relationship. This is eventually where she gets like more possessive and eventually like really wants Bear to just like stay in the home like with him all the time. And then like this is where she gets like left in the home, I think. And the scary thing about when she gets left in the home, it's shown that she doesn't move at all. I think this might be an allude to the real Nikki, like kind of gaining back some agency. As we saw like earlier, the jump scare that was there is like the real Nikki coming in and out of consciousness, even in like the beginning car scene where the wish first took place. I think this is a moment where like the real Nikki really like tried to stand her ground when she got like when she couldn't move at all until Bear got home again. That scene like really terrified me because it showed like how off-putting the wish Nikki is. Next thing that happens is the nighttime scene where she's like, "Oh, I don't like my dreams," and she stands in the corner and she like cries a bit because she feels like Bear pulling away from her. She does the flower moving scene in like the corner. That entire performance was the most unnerving thing in the world because I genuinely thought something bad was really gonna happen. And the actor for Nikki in this scene did an amazing job with like the entirety of the tension. And at the end of the scene where she was like, "Stay," was absolutely amazing. It was when Bear and Wish Nikki was in bed and she was like, "Stay." And then I think a day of work passes by and she like puts tape all over the walls, all over the door, excuse me, so Bear doesn't get to go out. And like Bear goes anyways and then comes back, and then something else happens where Bear is invited in a party. Wait, but before that, she makes a very little poem about what happens where Bear is not there and how there's a darkness darker than dark, which is her essentially like not existing, which Bear doesn't get because that's basically the wish that he made. Like, Wish Nikki does not exist as long as her role as being the most loved thing in his life is not there. And then the party scene happens. A couple of funny things happen and a couple of like very serious things happen in the party scene. First, the kind of funny thing was like Bear being afraid to invite Nikki because Ian said, "Oh, you should be able to go in by yourself," and Bear like went back and there was the entire scene where Bear was like, where Nikki, excuse me, was like, if you wanted me to go, you should have said that already. And that was like kind of valid and kind of like funny too. And then they get to the party. Wish Nikki is only focused on Bear, which everybody notices. They do the Jenga game, I think, and the Jenga asks to kiss whoever is on your left. And then Nikki turns around and makes this face at Sarah, which Bear already had a crush on, so you already know there's tension there. And we could talk about Sarah later. So Wish Nikki moves Sarah to the side and like does this pose in front of like everybody and in front of Bear because like the Jenga cube said kiss whoever's to your left, and then like tries to play it off, and then like the normal Nikki takes a bit of control as well. And that's when they recite the whole Hansel and Gretel like poem where the twist is like Hansel is into Gretel, and like it's a reference to how the normal Nikki told Sarah that he only saw Bear as a brother. And a lot of people theorize that, oh, normal Nikki is not into Bear, normal Nikki is to Bear, and from the director themselves, they did like two versions where like Nikki is into Bear and Nikki is not into Bear, and they mixed it up together in like the actual cut. And I think Wish Nikki makes this story because he's in front of Sarah and Bear, and that's like the information she's given. So that's the two things she's gonna put together, and that's like part of like normal Nikki like taking over. And normal Nikki comes through, bashes her own hair, head in, and being like, "Oh, this is not me." And then Bear has to leave and take Nikki to the hospital. And in the hospital scene, Wish Nikki is decently happy because all the attention is basically focused on her for like the night that Bear actually has to take care of her. So she's like jumping around, and so she's not taken into the hospital. So they go back home. And from there, Bear gets into the car and actually wishes to alter the wish. And the person on the phone connects him to normal Nikki and what she's going through, and we basically just hear a bunch of screams. And then after that scene, we get the scene of Sarah calling Bear at like 3 a.m. to say she got accepted to this art college, I'm pretty sure. And then Bear decides to try to sneak off, and then the real Nikki actually comes through and says, "Oh, she's asleep, please like end all my suffering, Bear." And Bear is like, "Oh, what's so wrong with being with me?" And then like that's when most of the audience, especially like my audience, like noticed that Bear was the villain, even though before this he was doing obviously like villainous stuff. So he goes out, meets with like Sarah, and then Sarah gives the line like, "Oh, I was on your left on that Jenga day." And then because like I was on your left, and because of his wish being like, "Oh, you should love me more than anyone in the world," Sarah goes kapoof because of like Wish Nikki making like sure that she's in that like number one place. And then Wish Nikki says like a particular thing like, "Oh, you wished for this. It was all your fault. It was all your fault. You wished for this." Which is like a kind of like subtle way of being like, "Oh, your wish wasn't good. I have like no choice but to follow this wish, and like it's kind of is all your fault," which like I do agree with. And then after Sarah goes kapoof, like Bear finally puts it together that, "Oh, I have to undo this." So he goes back to the original shop where he got the one wish willow, and he decides to get another willow, I think like two willows. And then after that he goes to like Ian. He tries to explain the entire thing that's going on. Ian like brings up, Bear in this moment brings up what Sarah told her about like them like being together before like Bear confessed his feelings to Nikki, because like Ian and Nikki were together before like Bear ever like had like feelings. And Bear the entire time knew like, oh, he was like together with Nikki in that sort of way. So Ian being kind of like jealous and being kind of like, oh, like mean to Bear almost, cracks the One Wish Willow and wishes for $1 billion. And Bear is like, no, you should see like the face in the movie of what like Bear was like. And things with Wish Nikki escalates as Wish Nikki starts to take on traits of Sarah, because he notices that Bear likes Sarah a lot more than she likes Nikki, and like the wish was to have that Nikki love Bear more than anyone in the world. And I think this is the most like off-putting version of Nikki, like the way that Nikki moves around physically, because like it's straying away from what Nikki is actually, even though what Nikki actually is as a human being, even though it wasn't really Nikki to ever like begin with. So things begin to escalate. Ian barges in with like, oh my goodness, I won $1 billion, and then he goes kapoofed because like Sarah was like, oh, that's another person that could like love him and be in competition for his love. Bear eventually makes his way to the bathroom. He hesitates a lot on what he should do, eventually getting the bottle of like the thing that killed the cat in the beginning, and Wish Nikki breaks the second Wish Willow, wishing that Bear loved her as much as she loved him. And the story ends with Bear like going away and like succumbing to what he took, and Wish Nikki going away, and then the real Nikki comes out. That's basically the summary of the story. Okay, final part. What do I think of all the characters, starting with Bear? Bear is not only the villain of Obsession, but he's the cause of his own demise at almost every single turn. He could have taken the decision earlier to take another Willow to try to undo his wish by either like giving it to Sarah or giving it to like somebody who's actually incentivized to help him. The moment he heard Nikki screaming on the phone was the moment he should have turned around. Before that, when he broke like the One Wish Willow, obviously he didn't know like the One Wish Willow would actually work. But once he saw like the real Nikki obviously suffering, and once he saw like the incongruence of Nikki, more red flags should have been raised and more like concern for Nikki should have been there. The fact that he only wanted to alter his wish after the consequences of his action in losing Sarah finally caught up to him. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick. Finally catches up to him, and he actually has to face like a death on his moral conscience, and he doesn't have like the strength to go through with his plan of getting rid of the wish at the end with like the cat method that took the cat out. Was kind of sad and disappointing. So Bear for me, not really my favorite character, but a really well portrayal of what happens when you have like a bad mentality going into relationship, when you have a sense of entitlement, when you're like really insecure and like not a lot of like confidence and like want to skirt around people's like own will or like own desires. I mean, he even uses AI in the beginning of the movie to like circumvent having to ask Nikki a question about something I'm forgetting. A lot of people online are like, oh, Bear should pass the controller, seeing like that, basically saying that like they could handle it better than like Bear could handle it. But the problem with this was like the main theme of the movie was that control was the main issue with Bear. He wanted certainty of like somebody loving him, and I feel like a lot of people commenting this also want that certainty in somebody loving him. But the entire like thing of the Wish Willow is that having that certainty of like somebody being absolutely obsessed with you and like being compelled to be with you like in that way isn't healthy, or it crosses like certain boundaries that another person might have with you. So Don't really like wish to pass the controller, don't comment that. Next up is Sarah. The entire time, that one scene with like her college acceptance letter, I'm like, what are you thinking? After you see Nikki like write the poem, give you this look right here and be like, oh my goodness, back off from him, and then you decide to meet him at like 3 a.m. in the morning. Like, damn, not a good decision there, Sarah. But overall, I like the fact that it offered a way out of somebody like actually who cared about Bear, who saw like who like was actually interested in Bear, and proved like kind of how the option of like a love for him was there, but he just chose not to because he's that much of like self-centered on his own like desire and obsession. But for Sarah's character, not the smartest decision to meet up with him. Didn't end well, but she was decent. She was like but the actor that played her like played her really well. Next up, Ian. Ian was totally trying to sabotage Bear with that first piece of advice, calling her like Freaky Nikki, which because he was like being together with Nikki before, I'm not sure what YouTube will censor, like being together with Nikki will before Bear decided to like try to confess his love with him. He made the $1 billion wish, which we all looked at him like, what? You really made that wish? And he had the audacity to go into the room knowing that Bear like explained what the Wish Willow did and what like the Wish Willow did to Nikki, and then immediately got kapoofed because of it. I think Ian is like a bit of a douchey guy, but damn, your ending was avoidable. Put two and two together. The wish worked, and what Bear was saying was true. He was like covered in like the remains of Sarah, and then you decided to go, hey, I have $1 billion. Come on, Ian. That will be the end of this video. Make sure to like, save, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. If you have any recommendations on things I should cover or new videos, make sure to put them down in the comment section. Tell me what you think about this video, and make sure to check out the other videos on my channels. If you made it this far, I'm pretty sure you would be interested. So thank you for watching.